Hey, Brigham with Drift here. In this video, 5 things I think you should know about the Signal Tailgunner. Before I get into the details, check out my specs and my biases below so you know where I'm coming from. I get these boards in a variety of conditions before I tell you what I think. And for the powder boards, most importantly, I get them in a lot of powder. Most of that's in the backcountry with our drift boards. And as a reminder, we're giving away a set of drift boards to one of you, a lucky subscriber, as soon as we hit 1,000. And I think we're about 50 people away as of making this video. So hit the subscribe if you haven't. Thanks for the support, the questions, the comments. We really hope to be able to keep bringing these videos to you. We've got quite a few really cool boards that we still need to talk about this year, so stay tuned. All right, so the first thing I would share is a little bit about Signal as a brand. So Signal is direct to consumer. They're not huge. I've actually only seen one of their boards in the wild here in Utah, but the reviews are consistently good. When I was looking for powder boards to try, this is a board that came up a lot and I just knew I had to try it. One of the coolest things about Signal is because they're direct to consumer, they have some price flexibility, and especially in the off season and at the beginning of the season, they have some really good deals. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely keep an eye on Signal. I look forward to getting on some of their other boards, and if you have any experience with some of their other boards, I'd love to hear about it. All right, second thing I'd share is just about the purpose of this board. So when you look at it, and I think when you read the description online, it sounds a little bit like, and looks a little bit like, okay, this looks kind of like a big mountain freeride board with, you know, some powder focus. And the description's a little confusing, but actually after having ridden the board and then reading that description, I think it's pretty spot on, minus a little bit of marketing mumbo jumbo. But I'm gonna say that this is primarily a powder board. But the cool thing about it as a powder board is that you can set it up and ride it with kind of a more traditional all mountain or freeride stance. So I rode this actually a little bit forward. I haven't even felt the need to set it back yet. And I ride a pretty wide stance. Typically, I do a little bit duck. And for the kind of riding I do, I like a stance that puts me in that kind of aggressive attack position. I think it just gives me better suspension in my legs and more power. And so one of the things I like about this as a powder board with this shape is that it's got great float. I mean, you've got a big, wide, long nose with some early rise, a fair amount of taper, and a lot of setback, but you can stand on it pretty center weighted. You can even weight that front foot a little bit, and you can really ride it aggressively, but you're still gonna get that float that you want. And I really like that, where a lot of powder boards, the goal is really to put you right on the tail of the board and to weight that back foot and pop that board up in the powder. This is one that really can plane out more because of the length and because of the shape. And I really appreciate that. That's kind of something I've been looking for. I like riding that way better. The third thing that's really cool about this as a powder board is that it's one of the more versatile powder boards for whatever type of powder you might find. So they talk about this being developed with people at Baldface Lodge, and you're thinking like, okay, big mountain, you know, high speed, bigger turns, and you can definitely push pretty hard on this on steep and deep, bigger mountain type powder, and it's awesome. But the thing that was surprising to me, especially because I'm on a 166, I sized up on this, as you know I'm prone to do, and I didn't regret that length at all. And especially for a board this long and this wide, it's really nimble in the trees and in, you know, more low angle style powder as well. I don't think I've been on another powder board that's this long that manages in the trees as well as this does. It's really cool. So comparing it, for example, to the Snow from Amplid, which I'll review soon, that's another board that you can ride pretty centered and even a little front foot weighted, and it'll still float, and that thing charges like big mountain powder lines. But that one is actually a little scary in tight trees. Same length, probably a whole centimeter narrower, and yet tougher in the trees than this. And I think the main reason is, and this is the fourth thing I'd share, is because this board is quite soft, even for its size. And so in the big mountain type stuff, in good snow, that softer flex doesn't really hurt you at all. You're not, hitting a lot of bumps or things that you need to power through, and the soft flex isn't really a problem. But then when you get into the trees, it's flexible enough torsionally and lengthwise that you can, twist it into those turns easier than something that's this big but stiffer. So for that powder versatility, it actually ends up being really cool. It's become one of my favorite boards to use in the backcountry because it feels manageable and really good, no matter what kind of powder I find myself in and no matter what those conditions are like. The fifth thing I would share on the downside is that because of that soft flex, there's really kind of two negatives there. One is if you're shorter and you have smaller feet and you're a heavier rider, I don't think this is going to be a great option. But on the other hand, if you're a little more like me, if you're tall and skinny and you have big feet, you want a bigger board, but often when you get a bigger board, they end up feeling stiffer than you'd like. This is a pretty cool option because it's softer than you would expect it to be. It makes it less of a free ride board, and even sizing up to the 166, it's still like surprisingly soft to me. So the downside of that is, again, certain riders it might not be a good fit, and then the other downside is everybody wants to market their board as a board that's great at everything. That's almost never true. You're either okay at everything or really good at usually a couple of things, and I would say this is really good at all kinds of powder. But once that snow's tracked out, if it's nasty, if it's icy, it just doesn't impress, and I think it's mostly because of that soft flex. And even though you have like a pretty decent amount of camber on it, like the early rise isn't way early, it's actually camber like way out to here. But again, with that softer flex, it's not very impressive on a groomer either. I mean, it's fine if you want this as like a, all-around resort board. It wouldn't be my top pick. But if you want a powder board and the rest of the time you're going to take a little bit more of a casual approach, I think it would be a great option. Now, on the other hand, if you want a powder board and then you want something maybe like a flagship where once it's tracked out and cruddy or it gets a little icy or you got some time to spend on the groomers, you want to charge and be able to hammer that terrain, like this just doesn't shine being pushed hard in variable snow or even on the groomers. So that's the downside. But again, that softer flex, I think it makes it awesome for the right rider and really cool as far as what it allows it to do as a powder board. So from that perspective, it's ended up being, easily one of my favorite powder boards of the season. So that is the Signal Tailgunner. Thanks a ton for watching. Hit me up in the comments if you got any questions or any insight you want to add, and we'll see you next time.